The invoice slid across our polished dining table toward me, the stark white paper a harsh contrast against the dark wood. My mother's perfectly manicured fingernail tapped twice beside my typed name. $1,500 a month, she said, her voice clinical as though discussing a business transaction rather than addressing her daughter. That includes rent, utilities, and your share of household costs. My vision tunneled to the itemized list: $900 base rent, $200 utilities, $400 household contribution. The words "late fees apply" were underlined at the bottom. A sudden chill washed over me despite the summer heat pouring through the window. Across the table, my sister Natalie examined her freshly painted nails, completely unbothered, while scrolling through Instagram. The realization hit me with physical force: I wasn't a daughter in this house. I was a tenant. A source of income. A solution to their problems. My name is Ophelia, I'm 23 and work 2 exhausting jobs. This is the story of how I turned financial exploitation into ownership. But Natalie doesn't pay anything, I said, hearing the tremor in my voice. She's still figuring out her direction. Mom's smile didn't reach her eyes. You have 2 jobs, Ophelia. You're stable. It's time you learn adult responsibility. Stable. The word echoed in my mind with bitter irony. I was stable because I hadn't had a day off in 6 months. Because I worked at the bank from 8 to 4 o'clock, then sprinted across town to serve tables until midnight. Because I clipped coupons and skipped breakfast and lived in the room I'd painted when I was 10. Dad didn't even look up from his plate. We trust you can manage that. Mom's fork tapped against her wine glass with deliberate precision. And just so we are clear, late payments come with a $50 fee. It's how the real world works. I nodded because what else could I do? I folded the paper carefully, slipped it into my pocket, and excused myself before the pressure building behind my eyes could betray me. Upstairs in my childhood bedroom, I opened my laptop and checked my bank balance. Not great, but not empty. I stared at the screen for a long moment before opening a new spreadsheet. I labeled it rent receipts and started typing. Downstairs, Natalie laughed at something on her phone. I added another column: expenses they don't pay. I was learning, just not the lesson they thought they were teaching. And when I opened my credit card statement, I saw her name on my account. By the end of the week, I'd worked 5 bank shifts, 3 closing shifts at the restaurant, and eaten exactly 4 full meals. My wrists ached from carrying trays. My legs throbbed from standing too long. My inbox was a mix of overdraft alerts and reminders about rent. When I came home Friday night, Natalie was draped across the living room couch, wearing one of my old sweatshirts like it was hers. The TV played a rerun of some dating show. On the coffee table sat an Amazon package with my name on it, addressed to me, purchased by someone else. Natalie, I said, holding up the package. Did you use my card again? She didn't even blink. You said I could once. That was months ago. For textbooks. She shrugged. Well, you never changed the login. I stared at her, waiting for even a hint of apology. None came, just the sound of canned laughter from the television. Mom walked in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. What's going on? She's still using my credit card, I said quietly. Mom sighed like she was already bored of the conversation. Ophelia, Natalie is trying to find her path. You're the one with steady income. Why not support each other instead of keeping score? I swallowed the lump in my throat. They didn't see it as theft. They saw it as expected, natural, deserved. She consumed, I balanced. That was the family equation. That night, I sat on my bed and scrolled through my bank app. There were charges I didn't recognize: cosmetics, streaming subscriptions, meal kits, none of them mine. All of them billed to the card linked to our shared family Wi-Fi account. I clicked open my spreadsheet and added a new tab: Natalie's charges. Then I opened a new browser tab and typed, how to dispute an authorized family credit card use. I didn't press enter. Instead, I opened another tab and searched, how to open a high-yield savings account. I opened the account during my lunch break on a Tuesday. Not at the branch where I worked, too visible, but at a credit union across town. I used my work email, set up a new P.O. box for correspondence, and funded it with the small bonus I'd earned last quarter for meeting targets. $1,000. A quiet start. That night, I updated my spreadsheet tab by tab: rent payments, utility contributions, groceries I'd bought without being asked. I created color-coded columns, green for confirmed payments, yellow for disputed charges, red for Natalie's digital footprints on my accounts. Every click felt like reclaiming a breath. 2 days later, I was balancing deposits at my teller window when Ryan leaned over the divider with his usual lazy grin. "You look like you're preparing for court." "Maybe I am," I muttered. He raised an eyebrow and I told him. "Not everything, but enough: the rent invoice, Natalie's charges, the unspoken rules of our house." "Want to see something?" he asked, then pulled up a public mortgage registry on his screen. "Your parents refinanced last year. They're delinquent, at least 90 days behind." I blinked. "But I've been paying." "They're not teaching you anything," he said. "They're keeping the lights on with your paycheck. That's not responsibility. That's dependence." Later that evening, I stared at my spreadsheet again, adding a new row beneath mortgage contribution in bold. I typed, "This isn't about helping me grow. This is about keeping them from drowning." Then I made 2 copies, one for my desktop, one for the cloud, and labeled the folder Evidence. I closed the screen and lay back on my bed, trying to calculate how long it might take to save enough to leave. The number was too big, the hours too many. But I wasn't just working anymore. I was recording. And recording, I was learning, could be its own kind of resistance. It started with Ryan sliding his phone across the break room table during a late lunch. "Look at this," he said. "Foreclosed 3-bedroom, decent neighborhood, priced way under market because the owner's desperate to sell." I expected a fixer-upper, but the pictures showed hardwood floors, clean windows, even a small backyard. It wasn't glamorous, but it looked possible. "I can't afford a house," I said, though my voice faltered in its certainty. Ryan shrugged. "Not today, but maybe not as far off as you think. You've been saving, right?" I nodded slowly, the number in my secret account climbing higher each week. Not enough for a dream home, but maybe enough for a foothold. That night, after my shift at the restaurant, I stayed up late reading everything I could find: how to buy a home through an LLC, ways to keep real estate purchases private, protecting personal identity in public records. By morning, I had a plan. Mrs. Jensen in mortgage had taught me enough about creative financing to be dangerous. And the seminars we'd hosted on establishing business entities had given me a framework. What I didn't know, I learned, quietly, methodically, without telling anyone except Ryan, who helped me navigate the property databases without leaving digital breadcrumbs. 3 months later, I had $6,000 saved and a target property, my parents' house. It wasn't easy to confirm what I suspected, but public records don't lie. They'd missed 4 mortgage payments. The foreclosure process had begun. They'd refinanced twice, pulling equity to cover expenses they couldn't afford. The house that had been in our family for generations was weeks away from auction. They never mentioned it. Not once. Not even when they increased my rent by $200 to cover rising costs. Not when they borrowed my car because there's needed repairs they couldn't pay for. Not when they claimed the water might be shut off due to city maintenance that was actually a missed utility bill. The plan came together faster than I expected. I established Triumph Properties LLC with myself as the sole owner, but my name buried under layers of paperwork. I arranged financing through a small local bank, not the one where I worked, using my savings history and steady income as leverage. Ryan connected me with a mentor from his investment club who agreed to be a silent partner, adding credibility to the application. His mentor contributed the bulk of the down payment, $25,000, in exchange for a 30% stake in the LLC, with an agreement that I could buy him out over 5 years as rental income accumulated. The day the foreclosure notice appeared in the public record, Triumph Properties submitted an offer to the bank, not enough to clear the full mortgage, but more than they'd get at auction. They accepted within hours. 3 days before my parents would have been served their final eviction notice, Triumph Properties LLC became the legal owner of the house they'd nearly lost. I had learned about the foreclosure timeline through my bank training and access to public records at work, tracking each legal step as it happened. My parents received the letter on a Tuesday morning. Mom texted me at work, "Need to talk when you get home." Family meeting. Natalie sent 3 question marks and a panicked emoji. They were waiting in the kitchen, Mom, Dad, Natalie, faces drawn with worry. A copy of the letter sat on the table between them. "We need to talk about this," Dad said, pushing the paper toward me. "Someone bought our house." I placed my folder on the table and opened it. Inside was everything: every rent check, every late fee, utility splits, grocery receipts, credit card charges under Natalie's name. It took them minutes to realize what they were looking at. "I kept every single document," I said. "Because you taught me to." Natalie sat stiffly, arms crossed, pretending not to read over Mom's shoulder. Dad stayed silent until he spotted the last page, the property deed. "What is this?" he asked, voice flat. "It's the deed to your house," I said. "Triumph Properties owns it now." His eyes scanned the page, then scanned it again. "This is real." "Yes. But how?" "You gave me an education and I put it to use." He gripped the table, his shoulders slumping forward slowly like a man unraveling. "We were trying to make you stronger. You made me silent," I said. "You made me tired. But I learned to document. I learned to survive. And I learned to win." Mom reached across the table, her fingers trembling. "Ophelia, please." I stood. "The mortgage is under a legal entity. You'll receive a new payment schedule next week. If you want to negotiate, use the email listed on the letter you received." Dad's eyes didn't leave the deed. His hands were still shaking. I walked them to the door, opened it, and waited until all three stepped outside. Natalie said nothing. Before I shut the door, I handed Mom an envelope. "You'll need this," I said. "It's everything you taught me." The envelope contained a formal notice. I had filed a fraud report with my credit card company for all of Natalie's unauthorized charges. The total, almost $3,000, would be reversed from their accounts within 30 days. It also included my forwarding address and new contact information. They would need it for rent payments and legal correspondence. 2 weeks later, I moved into a modest apartment across town that I'd found online and leased with my newfound financial stability. The room I chose faced east, so it caught the morning sun in full. I painted the walls soft white and rolled out the rug I'd stored for years. The brushes came out of their packaging with the quiet reverence of something sacred. A blank canvas waited on the easel. I hadn't painted in over 2 years. It wasn't just time or exhaustion. It was how small I'd felt in that house. How little space I was allowed to take up. Art had become indulgent, unnecessary, forgotten. Now it felt like oxygen. I was laying out my palettes when the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Mom stood there alone, holding something wrapped in tissue paper. She'd found my new address from the contact information I'd provided in the envelope. "I won't stay long," she said, voice low. "I just found this." She unwrapped the frame and handed it to me. It was a photo from my senior year art show, me standing in front of my painting, holding a blue ribbon, smiling like I believed it would matter forever. "You were so proud," she whispered. "We were wrong." I didn't say anything. I just looked at the photo, remembering the version of me who had existed before bank shifts and invoices, and learning how to survive in silence. "I thought maybe you'd want it back," she added. I nodded, took it from her hands, and placed it on the shelf in the art room without comment. She stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked back down the driveway. I didn't follow. Instead, I closed the door, walked to the easel, and picked up my brush. The canvas was still blank, but the light was good. I sent the rent notice on the 1st of the month. It was short, professional, and left no room for misunderstanding. Payment due to Triumph Properties LLC. Market rate. Grace period 5 days. Late fees apply. Though I'd blocked the family chat, I maintained a separate email account specifically for landlord-tenant communications with my parents. It felt strange to hit send, not out of guilt, but from the clarity of it, the quiet finality. I wasn't waiting for them to do the right thing anymore. I was simply doing what they had trained me to do. 2 days later, Ryan forwarded me an email from Natalie. She'd applied for a receptionist job at a local salon. She'd used me as a reference. I approved the request without comment. We'd exchanged personal contact information months ago when we started working on the property plan together. Emma came by that evening with takeout Thai, extra spring rolls, and we spread everything out across my dining table. Emma was my closest friend from art school who'd stuck with me even after I'd stopped painting. She'd been the first person I'd called when I signed the lease on my new apartment. Ryan showed up an hour later with cold sodas and a printout of the LLC's first quarterly report. "You're technically profitable," he said, raising a brow. "Didn't think your revenge arc would turn into a functioning business." I laughed, really laughed, and leaned back in my chair. They taught me to collect receipts, I said. I just took it a little further. Emma grinned. Maybe too far. Maybe not far enough, Ryan added. We clinked glasses and toasted to bad beginnings with better endings. Later, when the dishes were cleared and the house had gone quiet, I opened the drawer of my filing cabinet and slid the rent notice copy into a folder marked Sent. It was the first document I'd created without fear attached to it. The house was quiet. My account was stable. My brush sat clean beside a canvas half covered in deep orange and ash blue. Tomorrow I'd finish it. But tonight I simply let the silence be mine. 6 months after taking ownership of my parents' house, I rented a small studio space 3 blocks from my apartment. The studio smelled like new beginnings, fresh paint, unfinished wood, a hint of turpentine that reminded me of college. I stood in the center of the space, sunlight pouring in through tall windows, and let myself take it in. All of it. Mine. I'd signed the lease under Triumph Properties. The LLC had assets now, steady income from a mortgage they thought would break me. Instead, it built this. I unpacked the brushes first, lined them up by size, by memory. I hung the photo Mom gave me near the entrance, not for sentiment, but for witness. A record of who I used to be before I became this version of myself. When I dipped the first brush into color, my hand didn't tremble. I painted through the afternoon, broad strokes, no plan, just movement. The light shifted, the shadows stretched. My phone buzzed once from the counter, and I wiped my hands to check it. A message in the family group chat, unread since I left. Are you coming to dinner? We need to talk. Natalie's hours got cut. We're trying to catch up. Don't forget the mortgage is due. I stared at it for a moment, then typed, rent is due on the 1st, late fees apply. I added my landlord email address as a reminder of the proper channel for business matters. Then I blocked the thread. No more explanations, no more negotiations, just quiet. I turned off the phone, placed it in the drawer beneath the canvas table, and stepped back to look at what I'd created. It wasn't finished. It didn't need to be. The silence in the studio wasn't empty. It was earned. And as I picked up the brush again, I knew this wasn't revenge. It was return.